your music, man. Like I think I bought this record like 20 years ago.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I love that record. I haven't seen
yeah,
that in a
yeah.
yeah.
And I listened to it so much. Like I remember, I was like more discovering than like improvised music. And then one guy in this record store was like, "Yeah, you might like this," and I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll check it out." And I was just blown away. So, and
Wonderful.
like, it's it's
Still,
completely different. So,
I'm still playing that song, 51 Sorrows. That
oh, seriously?
particular,
Yeah,
yeah, it's on my last record I just put out called Dust with a
yeah.
quartet
Oh, yeah,
with
it's on there.
Lucian,
Yeah, I wanted to talk to
Randy.
you about this new record. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
So that tune in particular is always, it's like one of those tunes that just stays with me. I don't mind playing it again and again with different groups and different people.
it's nice, right? To do that. I do that also, like with two tunes, like for the last 15 years, like just keep playing, and I love it. It's you add a new drummer or something, and it's like something
Yeah, yeah,
different.
yeah,
It's so cool.
absolutely.
Yeah, well, this is such a cool record. But yeah, also I wanted to first start with this new one, Dust. It's
Hmm.
amazing, man. It's completely. I mean, it's you, but it's completely different. I was quite surprised because it's kind of mellow, almost like Paul Motianish in a way. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how did you? It's like sounds very nostalgic in a way, but like this record for me, at least what I've listened to it, like those songs Retina and Dust that ended. How did you compose the music for this one, and how did you first assemble the band? I mean, and all these things.
Well, the band kind of came about. I've been doing a lot of duets and other projects with Lucian Ban, the
Yeah,
Romanian pianist. So we've been working, I don't know how many years now. We did a duet for ECM, and ever since then we've been just kind of going strong. And then we've been adding different people for different projects because we
yeah.
like
I
working
wanted to ask you about
together.
that.
And we've done quite a few different projects, some new ones that are very exciting. This one came up because I really love the trio that you showed that record, 51
Yeah,
Stars. I did 3 records with that band. It was
yeah,
Randy Peterson and Ed Schuller. And I thought those 3 records encapsulated a nice, interesting time period where the first one was more kind of almost my interpretation of jazz tunes, the way I write. The second one, 51 Stars, kind of takes it a little further. And then by the third one, I wrote these kind of very intricate little things that sounded like they were free, even though they weren't. They were written. And then we improvised on them. And then I got to the point where, I left that behind. And then many years later, I was thinking about these pieces I was writing. I didn't want to write like that anymore. I wanted to write these kind of just, like you said, melancholy
mhm,
little ideas. And I was thinking about Dust and, uh, you know, you know, uh, there had been some close friends of mine who had died, and ashes to ashes and this kind of thing, and
yeah,
how wispy it is, and it's there one second and in dust the next, and
yeah,
but there's always that remnant that just makes you have to dig a little deeper while not hitting you over the head with a melody. So I wanted this kind of elusiveness, and so Randy Peterson was perfect for that. He
yeah,
understands that immediately. So he just kind of colored it and plays time the way he plays time,
yeah,
and just kind of gave us all this wonderful cushion to kind of like, it allowed us to hardly have to play, which is really lovely. Like, sometimes I love to just dig in and do my
yeah.
rock and roll chop and just kind of hit you over that. This was a much more kind of introverted way of just kind of like picking notes and just letting the listener interpret them or evoke their memories more
Yeah,
than me
yeah.
telling you what my memories are. I don't know if you noticed, but when you open the CD, there's a little inscription for,
No,
colon,
no,
and
no.
it doesn't say any names. It's for you to fill in. This is
Okay.
for whoever you want to remember, or whatever situation you want to remember,
Oh
whether
yeah.
it's a
Okay.
happy memory or a sad memory. And that was the kind of position I took. So many of the tunes I wrote were just kind of like very dreamlike,
Yeah, this
simple
Mojave,
little.
the first one, the Mojave, the desert, that
Mojave
one is, it's
one
beautiful, man.
Lucian wrote. Yeah,
Ah,
Lucian wrote
really?
that
Oh,
one.
that one is so
Yeah,
beautiful.
and
Oh,
he has a lovely sense of harmony and stuff. And immediately when he gave it to me and we were trying it out, just duet, and I said, "Can I use this for my record?" He's like, "Yeah, absolutely." Because immediately I felt this is part of this record. This is the
yeah.
desert. It just evoked everything I wanted to do. Absolutely.
And but how much of this music is like it's like a thin boundary, I think, between improvisation and compose, right? Like, how much did you guys discuss where to go? Like, I know in this one you wrote like the liner notes say in this record, like after you played the blast that you had to sit down and discuss it. Like, and I wanted to ask you, how much did you talk with this band? Because the group, John, I played with John a couple of times, and he's just amazing, and Randy and Lucian also. And did you give them like ideas, or did you just put them the music and just you played it?
I think the idea was like that basic premise that I just told you.
Yeah,
I said it's not about like exerting our jazz chops. It's not about exerting
yeah,
us
okay,
on it. This is about us looking inward, but like letting it just kind of hover in a very delicate way where we say what we need to say, get the melodies out we need to get out, just barely,
yeah,
That's all I said. I trust these guys. I've been working with
yeah,
Randy since 1980s,
yeah. I wanted to ask you that. Yeah,
Yeah,
when,
so John
when
McPhee since the 90s and Lucian
yeah,
since the 2000s. So, I have a strong relationship with all three. And of course, Lucian had worked with John Bear in
yeah,
many of his own projects. So there was so much trust there that I think it was literally like, yeah, we're not going to do it like bing, bing, bing,
yeah, sure, yeah,
we're just, and that was the only guideline was like play less, but make
sure.
it stronger, but, but not too,
Yeah,
very little direction because these guys are so intuitive and so beautiful and
yeah.
they all have their own stories to tell and they got it right away. I mean, I didn't
But
have to say much.
did you
Yeah.
play gigs with this band already, or?
We have played a few gigs and of course we had tours set up in both the States and Europe.
Yeah,
All of them have been canceled.
sure.
So this record is taking a hit a little bit because the Corona thing happened and
Yeah,
all the tours we had in the spring were canceled. So then we tried to move them into the summer, maybe some of them, and some of them in the fall, and then that's all been canceled. And
yeah,
now Americans can't go to Europe anyway, and so basically
yeah, yeah. I know.
we lost that moment. But we did some gigs before the Corona hit, just to
Yeah,
check it out, and they were great. Live, it's a little different because it's live, of course.
yeah, yeah,
You can't so inward live because you have to connect with the audience, but it is a nice band to play with, and I'm looking forward to
yeah. Me
touring
too.
if
Me
and
too.
ever
To
we
hear.
ever get out of this.
Ah, we will, man. But I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
you mentioned these guys, right? Like especially Randy Peterson. How did you meet? How did you guys meet? Because I think he's like on at least half of your records, and you seem to have
yeah.
like a really blind telepathy going on. Like, how did you guys start playing, or when was that? I mean, actually.
It was the '80s. I was young, much younger than him. He had moved from the Midwest to Boston to study with some drummer out here. I guess he just wanted to change. He had been playing mostly bebop gigs and
Oh,
other
wow.
kinds of gigs in the Midwest, and came out here and he did he just started doing gigs with whoever, and he started playing with this pianist Steve Lantner,
Oh,
just
yeah,
doing
yeah,
like jazz, whatever. And Steve Lantner, who I had been playing with a little bit, he was interested in microtones and doing quarter tone pianos and stuff. Said, "Man, you got to check this guy out. He has a different sound on the sim. The
yeah,
feel is just incredible." And I said, "Let's have him over." So I remember this back when I had a car, a pickup truck. Actually, I had a small pickup truck, and I picked him up, and he put the whole drum set in the pickup truck, and he had a big beard back then. And he sat in the car, and I think we said maybe 3 words to get to this half an hour trip we had to
yeah,
take to the studio we were going to play. He was a very quiet, intense guy. But as soon as he started playing, I could tell immediately, like, this is somebody this is unlike, it was just unique. It was personal.
yeah.
It had everything. And I wanted to learn from him.
Oh,
So I just said, "Do you want to play some more?" And then from there, we started playing all the time. He'd come over and leave his drum set here, and we'd sometimes play in the studio like 5 days a week, 12 hours a
Oh, wow,
day,
that's
just
amazing.
working on ideas. It was an incredible time period for me and him, because we both describe it as like kind of our school,
Yeah,
because we didn't go to school to, but this was like our way of working out like every single possible idea, no matter how horrible it was, we'd work at it and work at it. And just, we would make a big pot of espresso coffee and we'd drink that all day and then drink beers in between and play some
that's
more, and it was a magical time because we both had enough time to do it.
good. Yeah,
Because, I was working part time as a waiter and he was working part time in this thing or whatever. So we
like,
just get together every waking moment and just so by the time uh, I realized I wanted to really start a band, we had a group with Stephen Lantner, and that was kind of really experimental, a lot of microtonal things, and then there was a day where I'm like, we were in the basement and my father was upstairs, and I said, wouldn't it be great if he played with us? Like, because he wasn't really playing out, my father. He
yeah,
wasn't known back then. Nobody knew who he was. I mean, he was known very few circles as a composer and this
yeah.
and that. I said, Dad, come on down and play. And immediately, him, Randy, there was something there, and that's when we started the Joe Maneri Quartet. And then I started the Mat
Wow.
Maneri Trio. So it really came from all
Oh,
of that.
wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
quite, wow, that's interesting. And what about Lucian? Because Lucian also, you worked with him like at least for the last 10 years, right? But how did you meet him?
Yeah.
Like,
This happened much later. Obviously, I'd been
yeah,
playing without him. I had never heard of Lucian or anything, but he was doing this big project uh, for a festival that turned
this
into a bigger
Transylvania.
project.
Yeah.
No, before that, it was the
Oh, the
UNESCO Reimagined.
UNESCO. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the premiere was in Bucharest at this big opera house, and it was like an 8 or 9 piece band. And
Yeah.
originally, he had violin and cello, and the rest of the band was pretty much the same. And at the time, I think Nasheet Waits was the drummer, and the cellist couldn't make it, or something happened with the cellist. And Nasheet Waits told Lucian, "You should try this guy Mat Maneri. He plays viola, but you adapt it for viola instead of cello." So I got this last minute call with
Oh,
that
wow.
kind of thing, like he'd known me or he'd heard of me or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was a big group, so there was a lot of things, a lot of written material, a lot going on, and we had very little time to rehearse. We basically rehearsed once or twice, maybe in New York, and then we all flew to Romania, and then suddenly like we're recording this thing live.
Typical jazz
One of
day.
the, yeah, one of the sections was a piece, but the opening said viola piano open freely into the piece.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we'd never even rehearsed that yet, like not even in rehearsals that we tried playing with each other or anything. So now it's live. People are in the audience and recording us. And we did this duet opening for this one piece. And it hit both of us because we've talked about it since then. It's like, wow, we
That's
get
so.
a lot. We have something, and ever since then, it's like we've had a friendship.
Ah, beautiful. Yeah, it's like I wanted to ask you that because like there's also, I had like basically all the older records. I didn't know about the new ones. I checked them last week, the Dust, and
Right.
then this other one that I mentioned before, Transylvanian folk songs with Lucian, and
Yeah.
this one
Branded with
is,
John Sermon.
yeah, you play John Sermon. He's like one of my heroes. He is, I have all of his records. He's like one of those underrated greats who should be like there really. And you and the viola and the bass clarinet when he plays it, that's
I love that. Yeah.
those sounds match made in heaven. And I wanted to ask you, like, first of all, this Transylvanian folk songs, this is like kind of a joint project with you and Lucian, right?
Yes.
Or yeah. So how did you were doing Bartok, which who probably was very important for you in your musical development, and
Well,
how did you?
absolutely. The strange part, as a string player, Bartok was like, yeah, that's some
Yeah,
of the best shit, that you
yeah,
could do with the violin and all this. And I grew up with that. But lately Lucian's been getting more and more interested in like, these, folk songs and different things from his
yeah.
region. And Bartok, one of the first musicologists, basically, went to this region and meticulously recorded all this stuff, like on these wax cylinders, and transcribed
Crazy.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of folk songs. And he came up with the idea of like, let's do a project with this, where we use these folk songs that Bartok transcribed, but then we do it, we retranscribe, yeah, and for us. And I'm like, I love that idea. First of all, it has Bartok's fingerprints on it, and it has these folk melodies that are so soulful and we can do
Yeah,
so much with.
singable.
Great
Yeah.
idea. And then the thing is like, well, who should we do it with? And both of us immediately said John Sermon would be. And
How did
it
you
was
come
so
up with
funny
John
because
Sermon?
we just both thought of it immediately. And I have never worked with John Sermon ever,
Yeah,
and neither had Lucian. I had met John, and we had hung out at an ECM festival like 20 years before that, where we really got along. We hung out at the bar basically, and we're having a great time talking. And I always said, "Oh man, I just love to do the viola with the bass clarinet thing. I think it would sound
yeah,
great." And
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah. But of course, you talk these things in a bar, and then 20 years goes by, and
the
but
typical. Yeah,
it was one of those magical things where we both immediately thought of the same guy. So that was kind of providence in a way. It's like, okay, let's call him up and see.
yeah.
And it just happened. He's like, "This sounds interesting," and we did it, and it was fantastic.
You
Absolutely.
recorded in a church, right? I read, or a
It was
cathedral.
a church. It was a beautiful room. It's part of a museum, and it's
Ah,
just
like
this
that.
Baroque room that's just
Because the
stunning.
sound is so beautiful. I mean, it's like really.
It's really fantastically beautiful there. And the lovely thing, and this is the opposite of what usually happens, like on the UNESCO Reimagined, where you rush, and you just
Yeah.
do it. They allowed us to spend the week there, 5 days or something, in a hotel, and gave us a little
Wow.
rehearsal space. So we got together for 4 or 5 days before, just
Wow.
talking about the material, like Lucian and I each wrote up some sketches. We divided up the work, and had some ideas about this and that. But then we really wanted John to be a part of the kind of creative process, like, so it's not like so much like, here's our idea, you do this,
Yeah.
like, so we were allowed the time to let John kind of explore these tunes and then come up with his ideas. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
really a lovely collaborative experience.
That's so rare these days that you get actually, 5 days.
It
Usually it's
never,
like, okay, we have 4 hours. Let's get,
I know it never happens. And that's what, and it was a magical time because it was just, the weather was beautiful. This town was lovely. I remember
Amazing.
just enjoying the fact that we weren't like brutally exhausted or just
Yeah.
like running from train to train to just do
Yeah.
things. And what we were
Yeah.
just like, we could have dinner together. Why not? And we had the time to have
And
dinner
you
and
still will
talk.
have time to do
I'm
things.
gonna
Yeah.
go out, take a walk, and it was just so lovely to relax for 4 days and really talk about the music and its origins. And Lucian had studied into like a lot of these things, so it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can hear it. Like it's such a beautiful record, man. It's really,
Thank you. I
you know,
appreciate that.
there were many Bartok records done like this jazzified versions, which I kind of hate in a way because it's like, you know what I mean? It's like,
It's that's the thing. There's a difference between making something jazz
yeah,
or taking something that you love and making it your own.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I,
You
I
preserve
would
the folky
never
kind of
want.
character.
We wanted to
Yeah,
preserve the essence of it, but we also wanted to allow ourselves to be free to
yeah,
do our expressionistic things. And that's a fine line. It's a really hard balance.
yeah,
And that's the hardest thing, honestly, to do. Because, yeah, once you start, like, we'll make this part swing, it's over. I can,
yeah,
or,
yeah.
like, at least for me, this is
No, no,
my,
I
my,
agree. I agree.
a lot of
I
people,
agree.
maybe it's great for that, like, but for me, and that's how I actually view my improvisation at this point in my life. I grew up playing classical violin, Then I got into, improvisation, but then I got really into jazz, really into punk rock, really into this, really into North Indian classical music, really. I'm not a master of, North Indian classical music, but I've done enough of it and listened to enough of it that I could take aspects of it
Yeah. Yeah.
and not like mix it with jazz or mix it with free, but I could take the element of like a rag and say like I can make it my own in this way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's hard to do without making it sound like you're fusioning it or something,
Yeah, I
But
agree.
that's how I view my improvisation at this point. I try to take a little bit of everything, whether it's like hip hop or metal or whatever, but part of it comes through the way I play,
Yeah.
not in the obvious way, but it's there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that, like, about improvisation, because talking about British saxophone players, like you did with Lucian, this other great record with Evan Parker, who
Yeah.
Sounding Tears, who's also like, Evan is for me, well, probably for you as well. I mean, like for every improviser, like one of the founding fathers of improvisation, like really amazing stuff. And again, on that record, the tune Blessed, that's for me one of the best moments I've heard in the last, because
Wow.
seriously, man, I listened to it the other day like 3 times on one of those streaming things, and the space you guys leave there, and it's just like I was like, what? It's just there, and I wanted to ask you, like, how did you hook up with Evan actually and did this project? How did that come along? Because again, you sound so natural together, like.
That's a little more interesting story. Not an interesting story, but I'm trying to remember exactly how it went down. I think Lucian and I were talking about we've talked about doing a lot of different projects with a lot of different people because we enjoy collaborating because we were doing, you know, I think at this year done 6 years on the road as a duet, like 6 straight
Oh wow.
years of just playing duet. And it's great and we love it. But, after 6 years, it's like, let's add somebody to this flavor. And I think Lucian, who's coming out of classical composition and jazz piano, has been playing free music, but not isn't known for the free piano thing. Although he loves that stuff, but he wanted to play with a free guy. I think that some of the people he likes because he wanted to test his thing against that and how it would work. And Evan is one of those guys that I had met years and years ago. I met him in Newcastle, England, actually, at a pub.
Wow.
And
Okay.
he just seemed so grumpy. And I remember back then I had a nose ring. I was much younger than him. I had this nose ring, and he's like, "That's what I'm talking about. You kids with your nose rings." And I think he was having problems with his kids at the time or
Oh
something.
my God.
So nothing happened. We never played. And then, but so now years go by, I'm playing with Lucian. And I think one of his name came up. I had really enjoyed, because Steve Lake had produced all my records at ECM. He was
Yeah.
producing some of Evan Parker's. So, and I had been impressed with some of that stuff. Although I hadn't followed Evan like some people do. Like, I wasn't like buying all his records
Yeah.
because I was coming from a different place. But so it intrigued me, and I think Lucian was really interested. And what we really found interesting was like, okay, Evan is such a strong improviser. Uh, and I think Evan even invited me to do his festival in England once because I happened to be in England at the time, and I'd played with him, and we got along. But we wanted to see like what a, a mingling of like Lucian's style, my style, and Evan's style. Can we do it without disrupting Evan's thing or without disrupting
Yeah.
our thing? Or so that was an interesting question because we knew like what Evan does is Evan's thing,
Yeah.
and it's so strong and powerful, but that's not exactly what we do. Lucian's not a pianist like that. How would that work? Will it work? Let's see. And I think what we came up with was, wow, it can work because he adapted, we adapted, and we left the space to let it form its own thing.
Mm.
So I thought it was a very good experiment into that foray. And Evan, he's an interesting cat. Like we did a tour after that, and
Ah, really? Yes. Because this was
yeah,
recorded in a studio, right?
yeah, that
Yeah.
was recorded in the studio.
Yeah.
And then we did a tour in Europe a little bit,
Oh, I didn't.
which was a whole different thing from the studio thing. Like every night was a completely different bag. So that was
Yeah.
really exciting, because the studio thing was a very contained, okay, let's just see what works and blah, blah, blah. And it was beautiful. I love it. It had a nice mood to it, I thought, very nicely.
Yeah.
But then the live thing, we got to really explore the outer reaches of what we tried to do in the studio thing. And
Yeah.
it was a lovely experience. And Evan's a really interesting cat, man.
Yeah.
He's out there. Yeah. I mean, he's
Like,
like,
but in
well,
what do you
he's
mean? Like,
those guys,
for instance.
he's one of those guys that you'd never expect, though. But he's like, I was absolutely for Brexit. It's like, yeah, Brexit. Let's do Brexit. And he was
Really?
into those conspiracy theories, the whole thing. And like, so he's an
Wow.
interesting cat. Not what you'd expect, but very sweet and but also like a gruff guy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Sure.
like
I mean,
it.
he, he's been doing it for a long time. So, like,
He's
but
been doing it a long, long time.
I wanted to
But
ask you. So,
he was very generous with us, and like brought us to his mainstay club there in London, and
oh,
he
oh yeah. Yeah.
very yeah, super
Okay.
generous.
How do you approach, like, because I listened to your records now quite a lot the past weeks now, just to get the idea of your mind, how, I mean, how it works in a way at least. But what I found interesting, that I listened then to this other record, New Artifacts, with Tony and
Mhm.
Daniel Levin, and it's recorded live, which is a different animal in a way than a studio, but
Absolutely.
and you play kind of also way differently. You, as if your guys are speaking, it's a different kind of improv. And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you approach these improv situations in a
Yeah, that's a,
sense, like, the,
a really good question because some improvisers are like Cecil Taylor. They do what they do,
yeah,
and,
I will ask
and
you about that one. Yeah.
and they do what they do, and you could do
Yeah.
whatever. You could like cut your wrists, and they're going to still do what they do. And then there's some improvisers that really can adapt to different situations, and they just like fit the
Yeah.
situation. I tend to want to lean towards that. I like to be, adapting myself to different situations because I
Yeah.
enjoy the process. I do want to always have a sense of my own sound, my microtonality, the way I
Yeah.
approach notes and things. But if Tony Malaby is going to go here, I can go there with him, and I can really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Or if Dan Levin's going to play the strings this way, which I might not normally do, but I love Dan, but that might not be but I can go there and learn from it and try to adapt it to my own style. So I like to think of myself as a bridge towards many different styles, improvised wise. Because I like to play with a wide array of improvisers. Like
Yeah.
in the past month, I've just done 3 different recordings.
Oh,
One with Jen Shu, with Dan Weiss,
oh, seriously.
and Thomas More, and that's
Oh,
her
cool.
melodies and doing that kind of like, and she has all this music written, and then I'm looking at the music. There's no violin part. She's like, you adapt, you do your thing, but stylistically, I have to be there with her. I can't
Yeah.
just start playing. And then I did a recording with Michael Bizio, this bass player,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
with and Whit Dickey, and that's a whole other
Yeah.
thing.
The other, yeah, completely different
That
too.
was great. And then I did a recording with Chess Smith, Craig Taborn, and Bill Frisell, and that's this
What?
whole thing.
Seriously?
Yeah. I just recorded it. It was fantastic. 3
Wow.
completely different improvised styles. So I like to think that I can slide between these and honor what each one is about, but still maintain my thing and give a little bit of Mat Maneri to that. I hope,
Yeah.
and while respect and learning from these different things.
Yeah.
For me, like
That's
Bill Frisell
fascinating.
thing was like the Bill Frisell thing was like a bucket list thing because I was a fan of his like from the
He's
early
a
'80s.
god for me.
So like early '80s, I was like, I want to play with Bill Frisell. Back then, I wanted to do that. So to record with him all these years later was like, wow, I
How was it?
finally
How
got
was
there.
it?
It
But how
was
was it?
wonderful.
Yeah.
We had a great time. We had 2 days in the studio. We were like all wearing masks and like wearing masks and separated.
Seriously? Oh no.
It was lovely. It was a really sweet guy, and that band Craig and Chess and I did a trio for
So
ECM
that's the
before.
bell, right? The bell, yeah.
Yeah. So that
So that's
band,
the extension, or I don't know.
it's kind of an extension of that idea, just adding Bill. So it's just because that band already was so much fun
Yeah,
because
it's
Craig is
incredible.
distinct style, Chess is there, and it allowed us. It's open enough to allow us to do a lot of different ideas in a very interesting context. And adding Bill was just the perfect foil for all of us, I think. Yeah.
But what was it composition? Since I didn't know about this one, but like, did you do compositions or improvised stuff?
Yeah.
Or
We did Chess's compositions,
oh
so
wow,
he ideas, kind of the way we did the bell, these ideas, and
wow,
then
yeah, like
either
intervallic.
from one idea to the other, and or
Oh,
some of it
perfect.
was pretty strict, some of it wasn't, some of it was completely loose, but
Yeah,
all in all, Chess has a very interesting style that's
yeah,
unique to his own
very.
writing.
I wanted to ask you now, since you're talking about this, like, you've done so much work as a sideman also, and as a band leader. What do you prefer? I always get two different kinds of answers of people. Some say like, yeah, I love being a sideman because I just get there, drink my beer and do the stuff. Being a band leader is different. How is it like in your eyes and ears, actually?
Very little difference, honestly.
Oh, okay.
I think I take the music just as seriously either way. It's not like
Yeah.
I can just show up with somebody else's stuff. In fact, I might feel more responsible if it's not my band.
Oh, wow. Okay. Good.
Did I come to the level of what so and so writer wanted, or like is
Okay.
this what I find it maybe a little more stressful being a sideman because I want to please the person who hired me
Yeah. Okay.
because it's their creative vision. If it's their vision, I want their vision to be completed. And for the most part, they hire me because they know how I play, so
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
usually fits. But not always. It's not always the case. But I feel maybe a little bit greater responsibility as a sideman, but I think both are challenging. And at this point, I only lead something when I really have a hankering to. Whereas before, I was kind of churning out stuff and really going. I had
Yeah.
a lot of energy to do that. Nowadays, it's like the dust thing, that was a culmination of like maybe 7 years of just ideas in my head, and then
Okay.
sketches, and then let's do it. Just there was the right timing. I didn't push for it. It just kind of naturally happened. And
Yeah.
there's one project I do want to do, which is a sequel to the Pentagon record
Yeah.
that I've been kind of building up in my head. So that is something, as a leader, that's something I want to do, hopefully in the next year or so, if I can get enough money together to produce it. It's
Yeah.
all
I
about
know.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that kind of record takes money. It's going to be
Sure.
7 to 8 people, different tracks, and doing different things, and high-end studio stuff, which
Yeah.
I just don't have access to anymore. But it has to be an idea that I really want to do, or some of the stuff I'm doing with Lucian, like co-producing, that I enjoy because I have a partner. We can bounce off idea. We talk on the phone. Like, we're
Yeah.
good friends. Like, he'll call me at like 3 in the morning. What if we tried this? And I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. Like, we called so and so, and so that's kind of fun for me.
Yeah.
But I take both jobs very, like I said, if it's somebody else's vision, I want to be there as somebody who can help them see that vision come to fruition.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's a good
If I
good.
fuck up on my own project, it's like, okay, I fucked up. It's my
Yeah,
project, though.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, like speaking of this of your assignment work, like one of the best stuff is you playing with Paul Motian, those Life at the Village Vanguard stuff.
Oh,
Like
yeah, I love those. Yeah,
that,
and
the
not many people
hoax.
heard that. Unfortunately, I wish more people
Really,
check that out.
man,
Yeah, I
those
thought
with Chris and you guys are like those tunes, the hoax and ten and all that. Jesus, it's
I,
like I
that
wanted to
came
ask
out.
you, how was that? How did that happen playing with Paul actually? And
Well, this is a really fascinating story, and it kills me to say that like nobody really knows about that stuff except you, evidently, because I've never heard anybody comment on that. And when I got those records and heard what I did, I'm like, wow, I
yeah,
got to play with Paul Motian. I really got to play with Paul Motian because
yeah,
after that I ended up playing in his big group for 6 years. But before that, that was the first time I met him. Was that recording session? And it literally came up like maybe 5 days before the recording session. I think it was supposed to be another saxophonist with Chris, and
Oh,
they couldn't make it or something happened. I don't know what. And I don't know why Paul called me up, but he got my number somehow. And it's like the like the usual story, like Paul Motian here, yeah, the man, and I'm like, yeah, funny joke. Who's yeah, but yeah, all right, it's Paul Motian. It's like, yeah, I got this gig at the Vanguard, like we might record it. I don't know, like you want to do it? I'm like, yes, and literally showed up the day of the gig to do like a quick 1 hour rehearsal, and that was that.
oh.
And I'll tell you, I learned very fast. Paul just doesn't, like he just does it. So Paul, I don't know if you know, in the Vanguard, the gig starts at 9, the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
set. So we're all sitting in the back room, and I said, Paul, I'm going to go to the bathroom before we play, and I'm washing my hands, getting ready, and it's 8:59. Like 9 o'clock hits, and they started playing, and I'm not on stage.
Oh
Literally.
no. Seriously?
I run out there, and he just gives me this glare like, we started at 9, motherfucker.
Oh,
Like, I didn't know. Like most jazz clubs, you start a few minutes
yeah,
afterward.
yeah,
Oh, if it said 9, he started at 9, and that was his thing. You like super old school pro, just like I
yeah,
play from 9 to 9, 9:55 or whatever it was, that's the set, done, like no matter
yeah,
where we are. But and it was recorded by I think Winter and Winter, was it?
yeah, yeah. Peter,
Yeah.
yeah.
They spelt my name wrong. They didn't quite know who I was. The whole thing was a little weird. Like, who's this guy? Like, but Paul and I, like, it just, for me, it worked great. I loved it. And
Yeah,
Paul
it's
seemed to like it.
amazing, man. Yeah.
Right after that, he hired me for his larger group, and I played for another 6 years with him until he died after that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. But how
Yeah.
was it like to play with him? Like, because like this last record for me is like very Paul like composition wise. This Dust, like
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what I found out about Paul Motian is that he comes from the jazz school. Like, no matter, I mean, he's one of those people that could disguise the 32 bar form,
yeah,
but
yeah,
he was always playing. He was always playing it. It
yeah,
was always like 8 bar, 8 bar, like, but he played it in such a way that you didn't notice it happened, like,
yeah,
but in his head, he was just going ding, 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 ding,
yeah,
and there, like it was always there, like it was solid, like it was almost hard to break out of that 8 bar kind of phraseology thing with him because he just did it, but he did it in such a way that you know, it just felt you didn't know it was there. But
yeah,
the more I
yeah.
got
I
to
know.
play with him, I realized like, no, that's always there. That's his thing,
Yeah.
and it was a revelation, and it was really I never got. It's one of those weird things where I played with him a long time, and I was very honored to do it, but I never got close to the guy as a man.
Oh, wow.
And that he was close to some of the guys in the band. Like I remember him and Tony Malaby talking about food and this and what restaurant to go to, or so and so, or whoever he was talking to. And with me, it would be like, "Hey, Matt, how's it going?" I'm like, "Good, right on." And that was about it. That was the
Oh,
extent of our conversations for 6 years. So I always assumed, like, is he going to fire me? He never talks to me. He liked me. He just didn't want to talk about it. We just didn't have that kind of verbose kind of relationship.
yeah, yeah. That's so funny, man. No, but that,
That's
that band really. Also, you and Chris. Did you ever then play together with Chris also? With
yeah,
Potter?
yeah,
Yeah, because you
yeah,
guys
yeah.
sound amazing together. Also, like
Well, that was
really.
the first time I played with Chris. It was with that project. Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. I mean,
Yeah,
that was a big deal for me. I mean, that was like the other like bucket list kind of thing in my life.
yeah,
Like
sure.
Bill for this. So I got to do that thing, and then it comes out on record, and a couple records actually, a
Yeah,
series
yeah,
of records,
yeah,
and I thought they were great, and like nobody heard about it, nobody reviewed it and mentioned my name, or I'm like, it just kind of disappeared. It was one of those things like, well, it was the same with the Cecil Taylor duet I did at the
yeah.
Library of Congress recorded.
This Algon
And I
Quinn,
thought,
right?
wow, I played with Cecil Taylor duet live at the Library of Congress. Came out on record,
Yeah.
and it just disappeared. Nobody really knows about it. A few people know about it,
This is the
but I
Algon Quinn.
have those.
Algonquin Suite, right? This is this one with Cecil.
Yes,
Yeah,
Algonquin.
Algonquin. Yeah, this is amazing. Like the first piece, man. I listened to 30 minutes. You played duo. Like,
Yeah.
how was it like to play with Cecil for 30 minutes, improvised duo? I mean, like,
Well, I'll tell you that story. So I'm at the hotel the day before in Washington, D.C. Nice hotel. And I get a knock on the door around 11 at night, and it's like Cecil's boyfriend or manager. I don't know who it was.
yeah,
One
yeah,
of those guys.
yeah. Okay.
Like, Cecil just arrived. There's no suite for him here. We're going to another hotel. Like, really? This is kind of a nice hotel. So I had to pack up all my shit. It's 11 at night. I'm tired, like.
Okay.
We go to this other hotel that's really horrible, but it has a suite for him. But it's kind of a shitty hotel. So he says, like, Cecil wants you to come over and talk a little bit. I'm like, okay, cool. And now it's 11:30 at night. And he's like, I need some champagne. And the guy says, well, they don't have champagne here. It's like, they have champagne at the other hotel. Go to the other hotel that you were just at. Get the champagne, bring it home. So we went. So suddenly we're drinking champagne, and he's going in the other room, and I probably think he was doing blow or something. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But hanging out all night long, like hanging hard with some other people showed up, and suddenly it's 5 in the morning, and I'm like fucking drunk and tired and exhausted. And I said, like, look, Cecil, man, we got to play tomorrow night. I think I'm going to hit it, like right on, man. So I'll see you at 9. I said, well, Cecil, the gig's at 8. No, 9 in the morning. We got to rehearse. I'm like, what? 9 in the morning? It's 5 in the morning. He literally was sitting in the lobby at 9 in the morning, fresh as a daisy, ready to go. I was taking cold showers and I was
Oh my
green.
God.
So
Jeez.
So then we go to the Library of Congress at like 9 in the morning, and we rehearsed for about 5-6 hours just playing. And he's laughing, and my arms falling off. I was exhausted. I was sweating out the alcohol, and the whole thing. But we played for 5 hours, and we had a good time, and it was like amazing. But I was truly exhausted. So by the time the
Yeah,
concert goes around, that first set, what did you say was the 30 minutes?
30 minutes. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, that was edited by me, by the way. Did you know that?
no,
That first set was an hour and a half, and I had
no.
to cut it down to 30 minutes. Yeah. So
Seriously?
we cut out serious. So I edited it to make it fit the record. They said, we can't have an hour and a half first piece.
Yeah,
So I just took snippets. I mean, not snippets. I took 30 minutes of it
yeah,
basically, and and cut out huge portions because it was just too long for a CD at the time, and they didn't want to do a double record and whatever. I'm like, okay. And then we did the second set that made a
yeah.
perfect CD. Great. Uh, but my arm, was falling off. But I had the weird experience that I did feel, because during the rehearsal, I just felt like I'm playing with Cecil Taylor, and it was
Yeah.
his thing, just his style and his banging and thing, and it was great, and 88 keys, okay. But on the gig, I did feel that my thing kind of reached him a little bit, and there was some of that kind of like, he changed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, it allowed me to kind of insert a little of my style, which I was it moved me so much, man. I can't
Oh
tell you,
wow.
like, he's letting me do a little of my, like, there was definitely like a feeling of like, we're really improvising together now. This is wonderful. I'm not just playing along the record with Cecil,
Yeah.
it was a lovely, lovely experience. And then we hung that night till 5 in the morning. I had never been so wrecked in my life. Like, I needed 3 days of recuperation after
Eureka.
that. And he was fine. He was like up and going. He had that energy that I just, some people have, I guess.
Yeah. But he called you just for that project. That was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
oh wow.
He called me out of the blue. I had met him years before in Berlin with Randy Peterson. Randy and I
Yeah.
were in Berlin. We just went there just to like check out Berlin and give our cassette tapes of what we were
Yeah.
doing.
Sure.
Some people there, we had no idea how any of this worked. And somebody said, "Oh, Cecil's in town. You should go check out Cecil." So we were at this like club of Braxis on Kantstrasse. Suddenly like, he's drinking champagne all night, and we hung out till 7 in the morning. Just it was incredible. And then we ended up hanging out with him for a week or something.
Oh wow.
Really. And then I never worked with him, but then he called me up for this duet out of the blue. I don't know why. I got lucky, man.
Yeah.
Like
No, it's
I
it's
was
it's
calling. It's just
good
life.
moment.
Sometimes
Amazing moment you guys got. Yeah. I wanted to ask you what
proud of. Absolutely. Yeah.
one more collaboration, Matt. I spoke with Joe Morris about that and with Chris Lightcap. Like the quartet with Joe, like this is one of my favorite bands, like those Undertrue and that a cloud of Blackbirds, those records.
Yeah.
I told to Joe already, like those are one of my favorite records
Mhm.
because you guys sound so good together. And I wanted to ask you, how did you meet Joe actually, and how did this collaboration start? Like, how did you get so natural together? Because you know, guitar and viola are kind of at both strings instruments, and Joe also plays it in this different way. So
Joe's like one of the most unique guitarists I know.
yeah,
Truly, like when you think of unique, real personal
yeah,
voices, you think of Cecil Taylor, you think of people like that, you think of Joe Morris. I do anyway.
yeah, me, yeah,
Uh, and his knowledge of the free jazz scene in general, he wrote a book about it. I
yeah,
mean, it's a must read, I think, for anybody who's interested in this style of music. I think I met basically, he was a Boston guy, but I didn't really know much about the free jazz scene in Boston. I was kind of isolated, even though I was doing it. I didn't like know to look up people or whatever. So when um, ECM, my father Joe
yeah.
Maneri, and I did a performance in Montreal with Paul Blay because we did a gig in Boston, and Paul Blay saw us play and said, "Play
Seriously,
with me in Montreal." We're like, "Yay!"
really?
And we
Oh wow.
and that caught the eye of ECM. So ECM's like, "We'd like to do something with Joe Maneri and Mat Maneri." And the producer was Steve Lake, who I talked about. Said, "Well, there's another Boston guy I really like, Joe Morris. Let's put the three of them together." So I'd never really worked with Joe, knew his stuff, and stylistically, it was a bit of a stretch because Joe was kind of doing this kind of improvisation. My father was very strong in that kind
And
of
you
improvisation,
and
but
you're there,
so
yeah, yeah,
two strong, unique guys like doing their thing, and then I'm in the middle. And I think that goes back to an earlier question about bridging gaps of
yeah.
ideas and styles. I think that's where it really started because I was kind of forced into this situation. Like, well, Joe Morris is great; he's doing this, but my father's like, oh, like microtonal snake time, and Joe's like doing his thing. And how do I make this work as a I call myself the bridge, for that record.
Yeah.
And that's my first real foray into Joe Morris's world. And then after that, we just started playing together. And he put together those groups. And
Yeah,
we've had a relationship ever since then.
yeah,
We were friends. And then we had a rocky time. There was a moment where we didn't get along so well, and then we got along. Like
yeah. Sure, it's
uh,
like normal. Yeah,
you
uh,
know, it, that was and Joe at the time was a very strong, such a strong personality
yeah,
that
definitely. Yeah.
it could almost feel like you're fighting with him. I don't think he was fighting. I just didn't understand that at the time. Maybe I was a little too young and with a chip on my shoulder,
Yeah,
you know, where you have to grow up and mature and say, who fucking cares? Like, let's just be friends and work out our thing. So,
yeah, sure.
but some of those collaborations, Cloud of
Yeah,
Blackbirds and those things are some of my favorites too. Like, because
yeah,
I remember it wasn't so easy to do those at the time, but when we did them, there was a feeling of pride afterward. We did it, and it was unique. It was definitely Joe Morris, and it was definitely an interesting band that we still kind of play with once in a while. Yeah,
yeah. It's like especially Chris and Gerald, also the rhythm section. They're just like
yeah,
I played with Gerald a couple of times, and he's just he's like a snake, like everywhere. So, and you guys
absolutely.
blend together incredibly. So, you just mentioned Paul Blay. I wanted to ask you this question, but you kind of answered it a little. You got the ECM connection through Paul Blay then, or how did I wanted to ask you how did the ECM connection
I,
with
I'm
you start?
assuming, I'm assuming Paul Blay helped a lot of that without ever directly saying he did.
Okay.
Hired us for the Montreal gig, Montreal Jazz Festival, which is a
Yeah.
big thing, and they were honoring Paul Blay that year. So like he was already booked, but he told us the festival I really want to do this thing with Joe and Mat Maneri anyway. So they added on like a little half a set for us, like at midnight after everything was over, like, which was really lovely. Which all of a sudden were in the newspapers internationally. Nobody heard of us.
Yeah.
And my father, like people were. What happened was we played with Paul. The place was packed because the set before was like Jack DeJohnette and Gary Peacock or whoever it was. I can't remember, but we're all in the backstage, and I'm looking at all these like legends,
Yeah.
And we go on, and my father starts singing this crazy shit, and I think like maybe 40% of the audience just walked out immediately because it was so out. But the people who stayed there gave us like this 20-minute standing ovation. It was like incredible. I've never experienced anything like it because I think they'd never heard anything quite like it. It was so out and so different. My father to
Yeah.
them, because never been heard of, and he's an old fat man, beard, and in his 60s at the time, brand new to the scene, and
Yeah.
like was an electric feeling. Yeah. So I think Paul said, "Hey, ECM, these guys, watch out for them." But Paul, at the same time, said, "You can't search them out. Put out a record, any record, even if you pay for it in your own pocket. That'll be your calling card."
Oh,
So we
wow.
got Leo Records to put out "Get Ready to Receive Yourself," our first record, Joe
Yeah.
Maneri Quartet. I
Yeah.
recorded it in the basement of this house that I'm in right now with my
Oh,
own
wow.
little equipment done,
That's cool.
by myself. I'm the engineer. I'm the master. I mixed it, uh, and we had to pay to have it put out. I think we paid several grand,
Yeah. Sure.
and then all of a sudden we got reviews, and then some attention, and things started happening, and then all of a sudden ECM called us up. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
But
was a very lucky thing. Paul Blade coming to see us play this little club in Boston back all those years. Yeah,
incredible, man. Yeah. That's so
yeah.
cool. I,
You get
I,
lucky.
yeah. I just wanted to ask you just one last thing so that I don't waste too much of your time. Like, but it's like the ECM record. One of my favorites is also Trinity, the solo
Hmm.
stuff you did. I wanted to ask you, how do you approach a solo gig if you do still? For me, it's like I've started doing solo gigs last year or 2 years ago. Solo guitar, it's quite a scary thing because jazz. It's kind of about communication and improvisation. So for me, it's always about this how to create a different story every night. And how do you approach, let's say, solo viola playing? Like, what's in your head when you start an improv or a solo gig?
Well, what I do now is very different than what I did with Trinity. The last one of the last gigs I did in Europe was a solo gig in France,
Oh, wow.
right before the COVID hit. I was
Ah,
touring.
seriously.
I was with Gerald Cleaver
Ah,
and
seriously.
Joel Leon. We were doing a trio, but then
Oh,
we had
wow.
a few days off, and I got called up to do this little solo gig for this record label in the guy's apartment, and it was great, and it was just lovely, wonderful feeling, and you know, just a wonderful connection with the audience. I'll just say for Trinity, I was very uptight about it because it's like, like I wanted to, I had a lot of compositional ideas I wanted to
Yeah.
approach. I wanted a lot of, so it was very meticulous. And then I thought it was too long. I wanted to cut out half of it, but the
Ah,
producer put all
seriously.
this stuff in.
Oh, wow.
A lot of it, the very first day, they put mics around me so many different ways, and I did a take, and I thought it was great. They said, "We can hear your nose too much," because I breathe a lot when I play. I'm like,
Ah, yeah, for the breaks and yeah, okay.
they put the mics in different, and no matter where they put the mics, you got to get like a nasal
Oh
congestion thing,
my
or
God.
So I had already spent like 4 hours in the studio before I started really recording. I was stressed, and
Yeah.
uh, but the Trinity suite, those three pieces, I'm glad I did it because that was like really hard writing and hard to play physically. I meant it more as a challenge to myself. What can I do? Can I do like three counterpoint lines at the same time on a
Yeah.
violin? Not even a viola, but a violin. Um, and But when I do solo gigs now, and I've done them throughout my career. I don't seek out doing them too often because it takes a lot out of you just playing
Yeah.
solo viola. Like there's only so much range you can get and dynamics you can get,
Yeah.
like so. But it's about conveying a story and feeling the audience. And there's some sadness here, and I can play sad, There's just some levity here. I can do some levity. I can play a spiritual, or I can go into a jazz tune if I want, or I can leave it and just.
Yeah.
I have much more fun with it now than I did during Trinity, because that I took so freaking seriously. I'm doing a solo record for ECM, and I want to
Yeah.
write these ideas, and
Makes
I'm
sense.
proud of it. But it was also like,
Yeah.
if I ever do another solo record, I think it'll come much more from the fluidity of what yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool, man. Yeah, cool. I wanted to ask you that also. So cool, man. So many nice
Absolutely.
stories. Beautiful listening to you. Like so much history there already. So it's like quite cool.
And I'm
Now I
so happy to hear that you know so much of it, because sometimes people only know. It's so funny in the improvisation community.